What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to talk about today in regards to this new area of interest that is starting to organize and develop at a pretty quick pace. Now, I'm noticing right here, it's the area of interest that's currently southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. That is starting to show signs of broad rotation starting to take place, and it is showing signs of quick organization even before it gets to the Lesser Antilles. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into this right now. So here's the latest from the National Hurricane Center at the time of recording this video. This is likely going to be updated by the time it gets posted or by the time I end recording this, so feel free to stay tuned for that, but here's the situation that we have. As of 8 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, August 9th, near the Lesser and Greater Antilles, a tropical wave located several hundred miles to the west-southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands is producing a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms over the tropical Atlantic. Any development of this wave should be slow to occur over the next couple of days while it moves westward across the central tropical Atlantic. Afterward, conditions are expected to become more conducive for development while the wave moves west-northwestward, and a tropical depression could form by early next week while the system approaches the Lesser Antilles. The system is then forecast to continue moving generally west-northwest and approach the Greater Antilles by the middle part of next week. 60% chance of formation in the next 7 days, 0% in the next 48 hours. I was talking to Weather Center Nazario. Based on all the satellite observations he's noticed, he thinks that there should already be a 20% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, and there might be by the end of the day, and we'll keep you updated on that. However, based on what we're looking at, it's essentially concerning to say that the NHC is already saying that this could be forming before it gets to the Lesser Antilles, because before it was saying it near it or a little bit afterward. Now it's saying it's going to do it before it, and considering that the chances yesterday were surging, and I remember talking to Yoshi about it on stream, the NHC is very confident that this thing is going to develop. They just can't say it publicly, and that's what he told me. So that's ultimately stuff we're going to have to pay attention to, and ultimately stuff that we're going to have to keep tabs on down the road. So that's what we're looking at with this area of interest. This is going to eventually be tagged as Invest 98L, and this will have a pretty good chance of quick development before it gets over to the Antilles. But if we go ahead and zoom in on this, get to the central tropical Atlantic over here, essentially what we're looking at is this: we're seeing bursts of convection firing up. It's going to continue to fluctuate off and on with the convection. However, we're also noticing some broad rotation going on with the system. We weren't seeing that last night, but we were noticing it this morning at Storms United, and we were like, oh my god, something's going on right here. And we can go ahead and I want to go ahead and show you the true color imagery as well, just to kind of show you that as well. You're starting to notice that just a little bit. It's not very much it's not very large rotation. It's rather broad. But you are starting to notice that it's starting to add up, and it's starting to get there a little bit. Once we start seeing some outflow with this, that's when we should be concerned, because what outflow typically is telling me is this has a channel of pretty much able to allowing for this thing to organize and develop. And we saw with Debbie that there were dual channels. There were 2 channels of outflow, which really helped enhance its organization and strengthening. And that's essentially what the outflow is going to look like if this ends up happening. So that's when we should start raising some red flags and raising some concerns in regard to that. And that's definitely what we're going to be paying attention to. And we're going to go ahead and go back to the Atlantic-wide satellite imagery for the next thing, which is water vapor imagery. Where this thing is right now, I apologize, my nose is itchy. Where this thing is at right now, it's in an area of relatively good conditions. It's moved out some more of the high sheared environment areas, and it's moved into a weaker wind shear, and it's also moved into some more moist air as the surge continues to push further to the west. And it doesn't look like there's going to really be very much wind shear all the way until it gets to the Greater Antilles. So that's pretty concerning to take a look at. And I think that's why the NHC is so confident in this, because what they're seeing the same stuff I'm seeing. They're seeing a lot more moisture than what we were seeing previous. They're seeing warm waters, very warm waters. Matter of fact, we can go ahead and pull those up for you. The waters across the Atlantic Ocean is quite they're quite warm. Where this thing is at right now, it's in an area of about 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, or about 82 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you living in the United States and Puerto Rico and don't use the metric system. Same with Liberia and same with Burma, but we can talk about that another time. But Anyway, that's where it's at right now, and it's in a very good area of warm water. Like the MDR, where this thing is at, is very primed, at least in terms of ocean temperature, very primed for development. And this is just going to be the start of what's going to be going on for the rest of August, where this thing essentially will start blowing up. The hurricane season is going to blow up, and I've been saying this for quite a while. This is going to be in very active next 10 weeks or so, and Debbie was just the kickoff. So that's what we're looking at with global sea temperatures, at least in that area of the Atlantic, because as this thing moves further to the west, we're going to see areas of 29 plus degrees Celsius or 84 plus degree Fahrenheit waters pretty much all the way until it gets to the Bahamas, where it surges even higher to 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And as this thing moves closer to the Lesser Antilles, the water is going to continue to warm up. And another area I am very concerned about is the ocean heat content. Where this thing is forecasted to move through is an area of about 125 to 150 OHC. That is not a very small number, ladies and gentlemen, and essentially what 125 OHC can do is allow for rapid strengthening. And that's something that we absolutely do not want to see, ladies and gentlemen. I know I keep saying ladies and gentlemen like a broken record. I'm sorry. But the point is that we do not want to see 125 plus OHC as it's approaching the Lesser Antilles. Matter of fact, we can go back a few years. We're going to start with 2023 around this time, August 9th. And kind of see where it was at this point, climatologically speaking. Going to August 9th, 2023, there was about 100 to 125 OHC in that region, but it wasn't as concentrated. It was more isolated and more to the south than anything else. But where it's at right now, it's completely concentrated across the Lesser Antilles, especially the Leeward Islands right there. And we can also go back to August of 2020 as well, because that was a very big year for hurricanes. Right here, we can go back to August of 2020, August 8, 2020. We were barely cracking 100 OHC in a lot of these areas right here for early August. And this was around the time Isaias was going on. This is around the time that the tropics were really starting to ramp up. But the point is that just we've never seen this amount of OHC across that part of the region, or across a lot of regions like in the Atlantic Basin, in the Gulf of Mexico, and all of those areas right here. And the last thing I want to go ahead and show you is the August 2017 numbers, because that's when Irma and Maria were going on. August 9th, 2017, this is the charts we have. We were barely we were just getting above 80 OHC over there at this current point. So the fact that we're seeing the values we are right now, and we can go ahead and show you that right here. Let's go ahead and show you that right here. Boom. We're seeing 125 to 150 OHC across a lot of these areas. That is pretty concerning to say the very least, and that's something you need to keep tabs on and something you need to pay attention to. Another thing we're taking a look at, too, is the wind shear, and we were kind of alluding to this earlier. Where the system is at right now, there is some wind shear to the north of it and to the south of it, but where it is, like the center of it is, it's an area of relatively low wind shear. However, as this thing moves closer to the western MDR, it's going to be entering an area of very, very, very good wind shear, ladies and gentlemen. The reason I emphasize this is mainly because where this thing is going to be entering is going to have some really good conditions for rapid strengthening and rapid development. And matter of fact, I can go ahead and show you the shear and moisture forecast. I can go ahead and pull that up courtesy of the European. We're going to use the 0Z for this exercise right here, and we can go ahead and pull up the 200 to 850 millibar wind shear. And I'm also going to pull up the anomalies just to kind of see how they're going with this. But here's the shear forecast, where this thing is going to be moving out of. Yeah, there is going to be a little bit of shear to the north of it, but that could, at least at an angle, help enhance the outflow if it stays far enough away from it. But we'll have to keep tabs on that. And then as this thing starts to approach the Atlantic Basin right here, the wind shear where it's at definitely does play a bit of a larger role down the road. And you do have this massive trough that pushes into the Atlantic Ocean right here, which if that thing does enter into, that will essentially just tear the whole thing apart right there, at least if it starts entering into it. Like, as you can see, it starts tearing the tropical characteristics, and this looks like, at least when it enters that area, this looks more like an extratropical cyclone than a tropical cyclone, because extratropical cyclones, you see them generate a lot of that wind shear right there. So we're going to have to pay attention to that right there. Regardless, though, it's going to be entering a very good area of wind shear. I also want to check moisture as well, because I know I've been talking to my guys at Storms United. Moisture this time does not look like it's going to be an issue. And I can show you that. Yes, there's going to be some dry air to the north of it, but it's not being surrounded. It's not being cut off or anything like that. And where it's going to be at right there, it's going to be entering a good area of moisture, at least as it moves through. And it's essentially going to sustain itself due to the fact that the wind shear is not going to penetrate the core, according to a lot of these models, which should help this thing strengthen quite a bit. The reason Debbie didn't strengthen as much as many people thought it would, including myself, I thought it would get up to 90, was because of dry air intrusion, and it kind of stopped an inner core from being built until right before it made landfall. And even then, it was very flimsy, and it made landfall as an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane. But we're not going to have this time, and that's my concern, especially for the Antilles, especially for the Bahamas. And we've been seeing an increasing number of models shifting this closer and closer and closer to the United States. That's something that's raising alarm bells across a lot of areas right here. And that is something I am also very concerned about, because we're seeing those trends shifting further and further to the west, where that puts more and more people in Florida, North Carolina, and areas along the East Coast in the line of fire. That's something you need to pay attention to. And matter of fact, I can go ahead and show you some of the ensembles right here. We're going to go ahead and zoom out real quick and then go to the 0Z plots just to kind of show you what we're looking at in that regard. Okay, here we go. And we'll go ahead and use the 240 hour ones right here. We're seeing that shift further to the west. Let's go ahead and show you the 12Z right here. 12Z, you had a more concentrated setup, having it further to the east of the Bahamas and all that stuff, potentially impacting Bermuda. Let's go ahead and show you the 0Z right here. Boom. Okay, this thing is not updating. Let's go ahead and refresh that. There we go. Boom. More ensembles further to the west. That's a big concern that I have right there. That's something you need to pay very close attention to. And matter of fact, we're now seeing ensembles pushing this closer to the Bahamas, and some of them even making landfall in Florida. But that's going to depend on if this thing stays south of the Greater Antilles and moves into the Caribbean Sea, because now we're seeing some models, ensemble models, indicating that it will do that at least until it gets to the Dominican Republic. And some are even calling for it to stay south there until it gets to Cuba, which, if that were the case, that puts more people in the line of fire, and we absolutely, I repeat, absolutely do not want to see that. And just for my curiosity, I wanted to see what the 6Z ensembles are showing and comparing that to the 18Z. Here's the 6Z ensembles right here. Let's go ahead and go to the 18Z in comparison. Okay, that's interesting. The 6Z has this thing pushing out to sea a lot faster than the 18Z did, and we don't have the 12Z ensembles yet. So ultimately, what I would say is anything west of the Dominican Republic is way too uncertain for us to even consider if this thing is going to make landfall, impact you, or anything like that. I'm just showing you what the models are showing. But I will say, if you're watching from the Antilles and Puerto Rico, this thing could organize and develop and catch a lot of you guys off guard. Right now, I'm thinking maybe a strong tropical storm would be the max that it would hit. But considering that we've been seeing these model trends, I personally think that could go way higher, but we don't have the evidence to back that up just yet, and the NHC doesn't either. So we're going to hold off on and pump the brakes, at least on that regard right there. So that's what we're taking a look at with the ensemble runs. That's some stuff we're paying attention to. Matt-Julian oscillation is still going really strong across much of the Atlantic Ocean right there, and that's part of the reason why we're seeing this flare-up of convection going on across a lot of these areas. So I just figured I'd point that out very quickly. One other thing I want to show you guys is the climate reanalyzer. Here's the climate reanalyzer with the water temperatures. We are nearing record levels, and this is going to stay like that all hurricane season, and this is why you need to pay very close attention to it. Because matter of fact, we're at the point where we were in 2022. Like, we were at the peak water temperatures in 2022, but because the Sahara dust was such a menace, we didn't see any activity until September, and August was completely quiet. And that's what we're not seeing this time. We've seen 4 named systems already, throughout much of the area. So, yeah, it's quite concerning to say the very least. We had a period for much of 2022's hurricane season where we had almost 2 months of no activity. And now that's clearly not happening. 2023, everyone said it was in El Nino. That was going to be the same thing. That clearly didn't happen. And we had boom, 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 boom type of storms last year. So that's stuff we're going to have to keep tabs on. That's just kind of stuff you need to consider in terms of what this hurricane season may bring. Because we already have 4 named storms, 2 hurricanes, and 1 major, that one being Beryl. So I fully expect this thing to really ramp up and continue to wake up as time continues to go on. So let's go ahead and start the European model right here just to show you how strong it was. I kind of alluded to it earlier with the moisture forecast. This thing essentially is going to start off, it's going to develop most likely just west of the Lesser Antilles according to this right here, and it's going to be tropical depression to tropical storm strength before it starts to make that turn, strengthens up to a hurricane, and then it starts to develop fronts and becomes an extra tropical cyclone before approaching New England over here. So that's definitely something we're going to keep tabs on. Keep in mind, by the time this scenario goes out, this is 10 days out, and this is highly uncertain. So I would take that with a massive grain of salt. Now, as for the 6Z, I want to see what kind of like the impacts that the Caribbean could have in that regards and see how this closes off. Interestingly, it actually has a closing off east of the Antilles, so that's going to be really telling with this. And kind of a common trend I am noticing is the quicker this takes to strengthen, the further east this ultimately goes, and the further out this pushes out to sea. So ultimately, what I would say is if you're in the Antilles, if you're Lesser Antilles, Littoral Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, I would start preparing for this thing right now, and then kind of keep an update on the forecast to see how this whole thing ends up playing out. Let's go ahead and show you the GFS real quickly. We're going to show you the 0Z and then the 12Z just to kind of see what that shift is looking like. So here's the 0Z GFS. This thing's organizing and developing. Organizes west of the Lesser Antilles, makes landfall in the Dominican Republic, and then it moves north of the Bahamas, stays out to sea, becomes an extratropical cyclone, and makes landfall near Nova Scotia right there. That's near Halifax. And by the time that happens, once again, it's a bit far out. But let me go ahead and show you the 12Z because I think this is interesting. Right here, the 12Z has this thing developing once again west of the Lesser Antilles. It actually has it moving south of the Dominican Republic and making landfall as a 998 millibar tropical storm. And then it moves through the Bahamas, and then it really starts to ramp up, and it actually makes landfall in the Outer Banks and moves through the Virginia Beach area with the GFS. This is just one model run, but this is kind of indicative of how much of a shift to the west we are going to ultimately see with this. And that's why we're paying attention to this, and that's why we are highlighting, hey, we're seeing that shift to the west more and more people need to pay close attention to that. And again, all of this is going to come down to the steering currents, so that's what we're taking a look at. Let's go ahead and show you the 0Z Canadian as well. Here's the Canadian model, having this thing moving north of the Lesser Antilles and moving out to sea and just ultimately being a fish storm. None of the other models are really anticipating this. But if we go ahead and show you the 12Z, no, it actually doesn't have that much of a shift right there. It's more of has an eastward bias in regards to the European and GFS right there. Let's go ahead and show you the NavGem. I know the NavGem hasn't been really great with this thing. That hasn't been really registering tropical development that much. It still hasn't throughout a lot of this, so we're not going to really use that because, it's kind of an outlier in that regard. But one model we are going to show you is the Icon, pretty iconic for its scenarios and its westward bias. So let's show you the Icon. This is the 0Z, having this thing developing just east of the Lesser Antilles, organizing, making a pass near Puerto Rico, making landfall over Hispaniola, moving near the Turks and Caicos, and then starting to make that turn as we move north of the Bahamas. And then we go ahead and show you the 12Z model right here, just to show you that shift. The Icon hasn't really shifted it that much. The only thing it's shifted is it shifted the area of landfall a bit further to the east in the Dominican Republic. So ultimately, yeah, that's what we're seeing as a common theme with this. The stronger the system, the quicker it gets pushed out to sea. The weaker the system, the closer to the United States this ultimately gets. And this is all stuff we're going to have to pay close attention to here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us get more people engaged with weather. Also, be sure to join my Patreon. Link is the first link in the description down below if you want to support the channel if you want to support the channel directly. Shout out to Daniel as our official sponsor for this video. He's been a great help, and he was also on stream last night, so yay, it was pretty wonderful. Also, if you want to come help out with us, and if you want to come join us and kind of talk behind the scenes of what's going on, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. Link to that, folks, is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.